My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm 35 years old and live in a small house in the suburbs of Boston with my husband David, our 5-year-old son Ethan, and our beloved cat Whiskers. As I brewed my usual morning coffee in the sunlit kitchen, I thought about the busy day ahead. "Ethan, breakfast is ready." I called upstairs, and soon I heard little footsteps racing down. "Good morning, Mom. Has Dad already left?" Ethan hugged me with a big smile, but his voice sounded a bit sad. "Yes, he left early this morning for a business trip. But he'll be back by the weekend," I answered, gently stroking his blonde hair. David's work-related absences have become routine for our family. As we ate breakfast, I mentally organized my day's schedule. My managerial job at a marketing firm always means tight schedules and constant pressure. But seeing Ethan's smile gives me the strength to keep going. "Mom, can we go to the park this afternoon?" Ethan asked with a mouthful of pancakes. "I'm sorry, honey. Mom has to work late today. But let's go this weekend when Dad gets back, okay?" Ethan looked a little disappointed but quickly replied, "Okay, I understand. I'm looking forward to going with Dad." His understanding attitude always warms my heart. After dropping Ethan off at kindergarten, I thought about David on my drive to the office. His frequent business trips are a big challenge for our family. But it's also true that we're able to live comfortably thanks to his hard work. At the office, it was the usual marathon of meetings. The day flew by with planning new ad campaigns and client consultations. While eating lunch at my desk, Ethan's smiling face popped into my mind, giving me a moment of peace. Around 3 p.m., I was suddenly struck by severe abdominal pain. My colleague Jennifer rushed over, looking worried as I grimaced in pain. "Sarah, are you all right? You look pale." "My stomach, it hurts." I could barely speak. At Jennifer's urging, I decided to go to the hospital. After an examination, I was diagnosed with acute appendicitis and told I needed immediate hospitalization and surgery. But who will take care of Ethan? I asked the doctor in distress. "Can you contact a family member to look after your child?" the doctor gently suggested. David was on his business trip. My parents live far away and couldn't come immediately. After some hesitation, I decided to call my mother-in-law, Martha. We've had a somewhat awkward relationship, but I had no choice but to rely on her now. "Martha. It's Sarah. I have an urgent request." I explained the situation and asked her to take care of Ethan. Martha hesitated for a moment before answering, "All right. I'll take care of Ethan." As I lay on the operating table, I couldn't stop worrying about Ethan. But I knew I had to prioritize my health now. "Ethan, I'm sorry. Mommy will get better and come home soon," I whispered in my heart as the anesthesia slowly took effect. After the surgery, I woke up in a hospital bed. The soft sunlight streaming into the room told me it was morning. The surgery was successful, but I still felt pain all over my body. A nurse came in and gently spoke to me. "Mrs. Johnson, you're awake. How are you feeling?" "Thank you, it hurts a bit, but I'm okay," I answered weakly. After the nurse left, I immediately reached for my smartphone. I was so worried about Ethan. Martha had only sent a brief "he's fine" message last night, which didn't tell me much about the situation. I opened the pet camera app one had installed a few months ago. It was originally meant to keep an eye on Whiskers, but now it would help me check on Ethan. The screen showed our living room. At first, everything seemed normal, but after a while, Martha entered the room. She seemed to be looking for something, walking around the room. Then, she found Whiskers' food bag on the kitchen counter and picked it up. No way. I felt a sense of unease as I stared at the screen. Martha took the food bag and went to another room. She was out of the camera's view for a while, but soon returned with Ethan. "Come on, Ethan. It's breakfast time," I heard Martha's voice. "But Grandma, this is Whiskers' food," Ethan said, looking confused. "Don't say that. This is your breakfast for today. Now, eat up." Martha placed a bowl in front of Ethan and started pouring the cat food into it. Ethan tried to get up from his chair with a frightened expression, but Martha firmly held his shoulder down. "Grandma, stop. I don't want to eat this," Ethan cried out. I was shocked by this scene. I couldn't understand what was driving Martha to such behavior. I couldn't help but shout out loud, "Martha! Stop this right now!" Martha looked surprised and glanced around the room. She didn't know about the pet camera. "Sarah, where are you?" Martha asked, confused. "It's the pet camera, Martha. I can see everything you're doing. How dare you try to make Ethan eat cat food? Have you lost your mind?" Martha was stunned for a moment, but her expression quickly turned to anger. "Oh, I see. You've been spying on me. I can't believe this. It's not spying. I was just checking on Ethan's safety. More importantly, why are you doing this?" Instead of answering, Martha suddenly grabbed Ethan's arm and tried to drag him out of the room. "Grandma, it hurts," Ethan cried out. "Martha, stop. Don't hurt Ethan," I shouted desperately, but Martha wouldn't listen. Martha and Ethan disappeared from the screen, seemingly moving to another room. After a while, only Martha returned. She stared at the camera with cold eyes. "Sarah, you don't understand anything. I'm doing this for Ethan's own good." "What are you talking about? How is feeding him cat food good for Ethan?" Martha didn't answer. Instead, she slowly approached the camera and reached out her hand. The next moment, the screen went black, and the connection was lost. I was shaking with fear and anger. I had no idea what Martha was doing or where Ethan was. I desperately pressed the nurse call button. "Please, it's an emergency. Can you contact the police and ask them to go to my son's house?" The nurse looked confused but, seeing my desperate state, quickly complied. She contacted the police and explained the situation. Meanwhile, I tried calling David multiple times, but couldn't reach him. He was probably in a meeting. I left a voicemail asking him to call me back urgently. Time passed slowly. As I waited for news from the police, my mind was filled with anxiety and fear. Was Ethan safe? What was Martha thinking? And above all, I felt guilty for causing this situation. Finally, I got a call from the police. They had arrived at the house and spoken with Martha. Ethan was safe and currently in his room. However, Martha was being uncooperative with the police, insisting that there was no problem. I felt a little relieved, but I still couldn't completely relax. I didn't understand the reason for Martha's abnormal behavior. And I felt a sense of urgency to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. 3 days later, the doctor gave me permission to be discharged. Normally, a week-long hospital stay would be necessary after such surgery, but they allowed early discharge at my insistence. My body hadn't fully recovered yet, but I was so worried about Ethan that I wanted to get home as soon as possible. "Mrs. Johnson, please don't overexert yourself," the nurse said with concern. "Thank you. I'll be fine," I smiled in response, but inside I was filled with anxiety. On the taxi ride home, I tried calling David several times, but still couldn't reach him. The police had reported daily that Ethan was safe, but I still couldn't feel at ease. When I arrived home, I saw Martha standing in front of the entrance. Her expression was hard, and she didn't smile when she saw me. "Welcome home, Sarah," Martha's voice sounded cold. "I'm back, Martha. Where's Ethan?" "He's playing in his room." I quickly entered the house and headed to Ethan's room. When I opened the door, I saw Ethan sitting on the floor playing with Legos. "Ethan! Mom!" Ethan jumped up and clung to me. I hugged him tightly, checking for any signs of harm. Fortunately, there were no visible injuries. "Are you okay? Did Grandma do anything to you?" I asked in a low voice. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Grandma was scary. She told me to eat cat food and locked me in my room." Anger welled up in my chest. I needed an explanation from Martha. "Ethan, Mommy's going to talk to Grandma. Stay here, okay?" When I returned to the living room, Martha was sitting on the sofa. I stood in front of her and asked with a serious expression, "Martha, can you explain yourself? Why did you do such terrible things to Ethan?" Martha averted her eyes for a moment but then looked straight back at me. "Sarah, you wouldn't understand. I did it for Ethan's own good." "How is feeding him cat food good for Ethan? That child is too spoiled. He needs to learn that life isn't always easy." I was just trying to teach him that. I was shocked by Martha's words. Her thinking was beyond common sense. "Besides," Martha continued, "the way you and David are raising him, Ethan will turn out badly." I thought I had to correct that. "That's..." At that moment, we heard the front door open. Turning around, we saw David standing there. "Sarah, why are you home? What about the hospital?" David asked, surprised. "David, where have you been?" I've been trying to reach you so many times. David looked confused and started to say, I was busy with work. But he seemed to notice the tense atmosphere between us. Did something happen? I explained the situation to David. Martha's behavior, her treatment of Ethan, and how I even had to call the police. I could see David's expression changing gradually. Mom, is this true? David asked Martha. Yes, it's true. But it was all for Ethan's sake, Martha answered in a strong tone. I was watching David's reaction, but I felt something was off. Instead of surprise or anger, he seemed guilty. David, did you know about this? I asked fearfully. After a long silence, David slowly nodded. Sarah, I'm sorry. The truth is, I've been aware of Mom's behavior for a while now. Why didn't you stop her? My voice was trembling. Mom was dissatisfied with our parenting, and sometimes I agreed with her. David stumbled over his words. I stared at David in disbelief. To think that my husband had been silently allowing his mother's abnormal behavior. I felt betrayed. David, you're just as guilty. You put Ethan in danger. No, Sarah. But I wasn't willing to listen anymore. The problems in this family were deeper than I had imagined. Martha's distorted thinking, David's indecisiveness, and my own lack of awareness. All of these factors had combined to create this situation. I noticed Ethan peeking from the corner of the room. His eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Everyone, let's calm down and talk. For Ethan's sake, we adults need to find a solution. With those words, a long and difficult family meeting began. The three of us, me, David, and Martha, sat on the living room sofa, with an indescribable tension hanging in the air. Let's start by hearing from Martha, I quietly began. Why did you treat Ethan that way? Please tell us the real reason. Martha took a deep sigh and spoke with a distant look in her eyes. I once had 3 children of my own. David and I exchanged surprised looks. We had been told that David had no siblings. All 3 of them left home because of my overly strict discipline. David was the only one who stayed with me. Tears glistened in Martha's eyes. It was a vulnerable expression I had never seen before. I failed in raising my children. That's why I wanted Ethan to grow up strong and tough. But that doesn't justify trying to feed him cat food or locking him up, I said quietly but firmly. I know, but he seemed so spoiled to me. Martha's voice trembled. David spoke up. Mom, if you had concerns about our parenting, you should have communicated them differently. I don't want to hear that from you, David. Martha's voice suddenly turned cold. You knew and said nothing. I turned to David. Is that true? Why did you keep quiet? David covered his face with his hands, and after a moment of silence, he slowly began to speak. I sensed something was off about Mom's behavior. But I didn't want to hurt her. And Sarah, I didn't want to ruin our relationship either. But it was okay for Ethan to get hurt. My voice shook with anger. No. That's not. David tried desperately to explain, but the words wouldn't come. At this moment, I understood my husband's complex position. Love for his mother and responsibility towards his wife and child. He had been struggling between these two. However, while I could understand, I couldn't forgive. David, your indecisiveness made this situation worse. Martha interjected. Sarah, don't blame David. It's all my responsibility. A look of determination appeared in her eyes. My way of showing love was wrong. I tried to make Ethan strong, but I ended up hurting him instead. I'm truly sorry. With Martha's words, I felt the ice in my heart begin to melt a little. However, many problems still remained. After Martha's confession, a temporary silence fell over the room. Each of us was trying to sort out our thoughts. I broke the silence. Martha, I understand your past now. But that's no excuse for abusing Ethan. Abuse? That's... Martha tried to retort, but I cut her off. Trying to feed him cat food and locking him up is clearly abuse. Whatever your intentions, you ended up hurting Ethan. David intervened. Sarah, please be a little more gentle. Gentle? David, you should have taken a firmer stance. My voice trembled with anger. The room's atmosphere became tense again. I was thinking about Ethan too, Martha argued. Modern parenting is too soft. He'll struggle when he enters society. That's for us to decide. You have no right to interfere. No right? I'm his grandmother. It's natural for me to worry about my grandson's future. The argument escalated, with our voices gradually getting louder. Both of you, calm down, David tried desperately to mediate, but our quarrel didn't stop. Sarah, you're spoiling Ethan too much. Martha, your discipline is outdated and harmful. As the emotional confrontation continued, suddenly a small voice was heard. Stop it. We turned around to see Ethan standing at the room's entrance. His eyes were filled with tears, and he was hugging himself tightly. Everyone, please don't fight. At that moment, we all felt ashamed of our behavior. The sight of the young child caught in the middle of adults' disputes was heartbreaking. Ethan slowly entered the room and walked straight to Martha. We held our breath, watching. Grandma, Ethan took Martha's hand in his small ones. I was scared of you, but I don't hate you. Tears welled up in Martha's eyes. But you know, I don't want to eat cat food. Human food tastes better. Ethan's innocent words changed the atmosphere in the room completely. Martha burst into tears and hugged Ethan. I'm sorry, Ethan. Grandma was wrong. David and I were speechless at this unexpected turn of events. Ethan's pure heart had untangled the complex knot of adult emotions. David took my hand. Sarah, I need to apologize too. I should have spoken up earlier and more clearly. I exhaled deeply. While anger and distrust still lingered, perhaps it was time to take the first step towards reconciliation. "Let's start over," I suggested. "For Ethan's sake, we adults need to work together." Martha and David nodded. Ethan looked around at the three of us, a small smile forming on his face. At that moment, we took a new start as a family. There are still many problems to solve, but I believe Ethan's pure love will guide us in the right direction. The road ahead won't be easy, but we are determined to move forward, one step at a time, keeping today's events close to our hearts. 3 months have passed since then. Our family now attends weekly family counseling sessions with Dr. Anderson. At first, everyone was tense and struggled to open up, but gradually we began to share our true feelings. "Martha, I understand how your past experiences have influenced your current behavior," Dr. Anderson spoke in a gentle voice. "However, that doesn't justify hurting your grandson." Martha nodded, her eyes tearing up as she replied, "I know. My actions were wrong. I'm truly sorry for hurting Ethan." Hearing her words, I felt the ice in my heart melting bit by bit. David has changed too. I should have intervened earlier. I deeply regret not being able to protect my wife and son. As we continued with counseling, we began to understand each other's feelings and build new relationships. Martha is working hard to change her behavior and repair her relationship with Ethan. One afternoon, we were having a picnic in the park. As we watched Ethan happily playing on the playground equipment, Martha approached me. "Sarah, you and David are wonderful parents," she said with a soft smile. "Ethan looks so happy and is growing up so healthily." "Thank you, Martha," I replied with genuine gratitude. Just then, Ethan came running over. "Grandma, let's go on the swing together." Martha hesitated for a moment, but her face naturally lit up at Ethan's innocent smile. "Of course, Ethan." Watching the two of them happily heading towards the swings, I felt a warmth in my chest. As we were preparing to go home in the evening, Ethan suddenly stood in front of Martha. "Grandma, I'm not scared anymore. I love you." Overwhelmed with emotion, Martha gently hugged Ethan. "I love you too, Ethan. I'm sorry, Grandma was wrong before." Seeing this scene, David and I caught each other's eye and smiled. On the way home, Ethan contentedly said, "Today was the best day ever." I gently stroked my son's head and replied, "Yes, it really was a wonderful day." Family bonds can sometimes be hurt and shaken. But with mutual care and an unwillingness to give up, they can always be repaired. Today's events proved that. We'll surely face more difficulties in the future. But we're not afraid anymore. We have confidence that we can overcome them together as a family.